evening, everybody. Woo. Tonight, I'll be performing various pieces informed by folk melodies, tracking their origins across the Atlantic and across Europe. I'll play some classical pieces inspired by Eastern European folk melodies, and also some North American fiddle tunes that shifted when they came across the Atlantic from Ireland and Scotland. Many people ask me what the difference is between a fiddle and a violin, but I'm here to tell you that it's the same instrument. I will be playing this same wooden box all evening in the classical pieces and in the fiddle music pieces I play. Fiddle music is often associated with folk, dance tunes learned by ear, where the violin is associated with classical pieces learned from sheet music. I just played the Polish Capriccio from Grzina Baczewicz. She was born in 1909 in Lodz, Poland, was a child prodigy, and composed her first piano piece at the age of 13. She studied violin and piano at the Warsaw Conservatory of Music, and then, along with a group of Poles, studied with Nadia Boulanger, an influential composition teacher in Paris during the 1930s. She explored a neoclassical style and achieved much national and international acclaim for her music. She also taught at the State Conservatory of Music in Lodz, Poland, and during that time composed the Polish Capriccio in 1949 that I just played. This piece is inspired by Polish folk melodies. Specifically, the structure of the work is inspired by the Kujawiak dance form that has a slow beginning, like this. It has a faster middle. And then it ends with an acceleration. This piece is also idiomatic for the violin. The main phrase is built off an octave leap, which is the distance from your first finger to your pinky finger up here, and that's characteristic of folk melodies. In 1954, Baczewicz decided to compose full-time, and she continued composing throughout Stalinist period of artistic repression. She won many prestigious awards throughout her career, and later in her career moved away from neoclassical to experimental sonorism, 12-tone, aleatoricism, and collage. After this recital, I'd encourage you to go and check out other compositions of Baczewicz. Throughout her career, however, she was very inspired by the Hungarian composer Bela Bartok, and here are his Romanian folk dances. As you see in your program, Bela Bartók was born in 1881 in Hungary. He was an ethnomusicologist, pianist, and composer. And this piece that I just played is a nationalist composition. Bartók constantly sought to define and reflect Hungarian national identity in his pieces. In this piece, he uses Hungarian folk music sources, wanting to bring rural music tradition and culture into an urban setting and celebrate its authenticity. To compose this, Bartók visited many small villages in Romania in 1910 and 1912 to record and transcribe the melodies on a phonograph wax cylinder recording device, which is one of the earliest forms of recording technology. I would like to play one of these recordings for you, the first movement, Dance with Sticks, to compare it with Bartók's resulting composition. It has 2 violins from Vionceni in Mureș County, Transylvania, Romania. Warning, it will sound kind of scratchy, but if you listen closely, you can still hear this melodic theme, which Bartók called the motto of the piece and sought to preserve, which sounds like this. All right, here's the recording. So, if you guys could hear the melody at all in there, Bartók preserved many things in this original source. He preserved the ornamentation these fiddlers were using, the embellishments and accents, also that main theme melody, though in recording it's in the higher octave. He also kind of used there's a second violin playing below the higher violin, and he kind of used that chord progression because the key in this sits somewhere between A minor and A major in the recording. And Bartók has emphasized the minor and the strong beginning chords the piano plays, but he also ends the phrases with A major chords. The elements that Bartók did not preserve is that sound of the voice singing or chanting in the background. I don't know if you could hear that. And then there's that second part in the end that goes to a major key that he didn't include. But I'd recommend checking out the other movements. They're all on YouTube to listen to the sources of that. All right, so let's move slightly northwest from Romanian fiddle music to Irish. When I was 6 years old, my family went on a trip to England and Ireland, and in Ireland, I witnessed fiddlers jamming together in a circle in a corner of a pub, and ever since then, I've been so drawn to the lilting energy of this music. Irish music is really the base for both Cape Breton music, which I'll play some later, and old-time Appalachian music, which I'll also play. So let's track the progression of some tunes across the Atlantic. First, I will play some Irish reels to give you a sense of what Irish music sounds like. It's upbeat. A reel is an upbeat dance tune that's in either 2/4 or 4/4. It has a binary form with an A part repeated and a B part repeated. And in each part, there's usually an even 8 bars, so tunes are 32 bars long, and this is suited for dancing. Tunes can also have 3rd and 4th and 5th and millions of other parts or variations that keep going. Fiddlers also like to put several tunes into medleys to keep dancers energized by switching keys or tonalities. And I put this medley together with 2 tunes in the key of D minor and 1 in the key of D major. The tunes are the Porthole of Kelp, Maids of Mitchelstown, and Lord Gordon's Reel. So in order to kind of speak in the dialect of Irish fiddle music, I infuse specific ornamentations into my playing and embellishments into my playing, like triplets, grace notes, or rolls, which I will talk about them later. But the Irish roll is characteristic to Irish music, and it sounds like this slowed down. So it starts with the pitch, and then it goes to the above neighboring note, back to the original, and then to the below neighboring note, and then back to the original one again. The goal is not to hear all those individual notes, however. It is to disrupt the original pitch. And this reflects the sound of bagpipes in Scotland or uilleann pipes in Ireland, because these pipes don't have bows to articulate rhythmic changes within one pitch, so they must use these ornaments to distinguish rhythms. Fiddlers have adapted their playing over time to match this technique, and it sounds like this sped up. All right, here's a tune from Scotland called Flowers of Edinburgh. Originally, I learned it from a recording of the Scottish dancing master, violinist, fiddler, and composer James Scott Skinner from the early 1900s. This is a reel with even dance rhythms, and later I'll play the old-time American version. So, growing up in Seattle, most of my favorite fiddlers and musical heroes were old-time musicians. And this old-time means the music that comes from North Carolina, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and several other Appalachian and southern states. And usually in configurations with banjo, guitar, bass, mandolin, and fiddle. This old-time music dates back to when Scots and Irish settlers arrived in the Appalachian Mountains during the 17th and 18th centuries and brought their fiddles, guitars, and tunes with them. It is the precursor to bluegrass music. Old-time musicians are really obsessed with preserving an old tradition and learning tunes from old scratchy recordings of fiddlers from the early 20th century. So there are many more scratchy recordings where that one came from. The banjo is also originally a West African instrument, and during the transatlantic slave trade, it was appropriated in the New World by white minstrel musicians. The addition of the banjo significantly changed the tunes. Banjo players sometimes play with a claw hammer style, involves holding your hand in this claw shape and strumming like this on the fiddle. If you can imagine that on a banjo. This style of clawhammer rhythm added a rhythmic pulse to the music and rendered tunes much simpler melodically and much more complex rhythmically, specifically with bowing. This happened to that tune called Flowers of Edinburgh. I learned the version I'm about to play from a recording of Art Galbraith, a fiddler from Springfield, Missouri. His great-grandfather Andrew Galbraith, a dancing master in East Tennessee, handed him down this version from at least 1840. The A and B part have switched. I'll refer to them as the high part and the low part regarding the pitch. And there's an extra beat in the low part that makes the tune crooked, so it doesn't have an even number of beats in the A part or the B part, and thus it couldn't be danced to. Now I'll invite up Stuart Lyons to join me on guitar. You might see me kick my foot up or say one more time to indicate the end of a tune. Since the fiddle is kind of the leading the tune, fiddlers must communicate with the guitar or banjo players to alert when it's going to end. And Stuart will play a boom chuck rhythm style of guitar, which is intended to keep the rhythm going steady forward, kind of like a train, while the fiddle kind of dances melodically on top of it. So now we're going to play another old-time tune from a Virginia fiddler named John Ashby. It's called Going to the Free State. I'm going to tune my fiddle from this standard G-D-A-E tuning, which sounds like this, to cross tuning, which I will show you in a moment. I'll adjust this, but it sounds like this, which is A-E-A-E. So this tuning makes my fiddle resonate in the key of A, and it's easier to play with a rhythmic bow rocking figure 8 pattern like this. Often I think of my bow moving horizontally when I'm playing classical music or Irish music, but in old time I think of vertical movement also to dig into the strings and the pulsing rhythm of the tune. In this tune, I'll use a bow triplet ornament that originally came from Irish music. In Irish music, it sounds like this, slowly. But round peak style fiddlers from North Carolina infused this technique into old-time music, and while it starts with a down bow and usually is on the on beat in Irish music, In old time, it starts with an up bow and is on the offbeat, and it sounds like this. And you'll hear me play that in this tune. So let's shift back over to Ireland for a moment to track a tune that's traveled instead up to Canada. First, I'll play 2 Irish slip jigs. A slip jig is a type of jig that's in 9/8 instead of 6/8, and it's also a popular Irish step dance. The tunes are My Mind Will Never Be Easy and Fig for a Kiss. There's a version very similar to this tune that comes from Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. When I first started taking fiddle lessons, I went to a concert by a fiddler named Natalie McMaster, and she's from the tiny island of Cape Breton. She was so talented and such an energetic performer that I was so inspired by the buoyancy and joy of her music. In Cape Breton, there are more fiddlers per capita than any other place in the world. They often gather together in kitchen parties where a fiddle is passed around a circle and each person plays a medley of tunes with a pianist. Step dancers are dancing along. The Cape Breton fiddler named Brenda Stubbart plays that slip jig that I just started with, but she calls it "My Mind Will Never Be Easy," which that word has Gaelic roots that traveled across the Atlantic. She picked up the tune from her father's playing. Again, this is all part of like an oral and aural tradition. Now it is not a slip jig anymore. It has been evened out to be in 6/8, and it also has been sped up. So here's the first phrase of the Irish version. And this is the Cape Breton version. And it does have, Cape Breton music does have the same type of triplet and grace note accents that Irish music does, but a characteristic Cape Breton ornament is called, in classical music, often called a mordant, which sounds like this slowed down. But people in Cape Breton call it the Cape Breton wiggle, and it sounds like this sped up. Though I won't be playing this set with accompaniment on these tunes, the piano is often an essential element to Cape Breton fiddle music. Its syncopated rhythms create bouncy, lively feel that contrasts with the darker, drowsier sound of Irish music. This driving beat propels a downward energy that matches Cape Breton step dancers and their goal of keeping their feet, quote, close to the floor and their upper body relatively sturdy. I'll try to play with that same syncopated downward energy. And here's a set of tunes from Cape Breton that start with that version of "My Mind Will Never Be Easy." All right. Well, I have been very inspired from all of these influences to write some of my own music. I'll invite out Stuart Lyons again to join me for these last two pieces. Woo. First, I will play a waltz that I wrote, kind of with Celtic styles in mind, although it doesn't really conform to one specific style. It also has some jazz influences, as I started by thinking about a chord progression first instead of a melody. And then we'll finally play a tune that I wrote inspired by old-time music that's called Snowtown. I started writing this tune last year, this time, during the very long snowy winter, feeling very ready for spring. Thank you so much for coming out to this recital tonight, and I hope you enjoy the last two tunes.